is in binding irreversibly the ubiquitinated proteins. Then the ATPases are able to unfold the substrates because only an unfolded polypeptide can be translocated to a small opening in the alpha rings, which you have to permeate to enter the central degradative chain. In fact, this is a gated entry place, and one of the roles of ATP, which we now understand, is to open this gate, which allows transplantation into the destructive central chain. We now have an almost atomic understanding of this gate opening process, and let me just share with you some of my favorite electron micrographs in mechanistic insights. Through the work of several postdoctoral fellows and academics, but especially David Smith, we're able to show that ATP binding leads to an opening that is the entry site for substrates. The entry diffraction by Lowell and Huber had shown that this 20S eukaryotic proteasome is actually closed at each end. But then, in collaboration with the Finley lab, they were able to hypothesize a gating function. If one removes these N-termini of the alpha subunits, substrates could enter and be degraded. This structure is an active one. This is really a very low activity one, where substrates can only enter when there's accidental occasional open. But when ATP or a non-hybridizable ATP analog binds to the larger ATPase complex, then the gate opens and substrates can enter. When ATP is hybridized to ADP, the gate is closed. And in the intracellular environment where potassium is high, the proteasome is maintained in an inactive environment, even at 320S by gate closing. Now, the mystery of how it opened was advanced when David Smith noticed that in the archaeomate ATPases, all 6 identical subunits have a hydrophobic tyrosine S protein, and a similar C-terminal protein is found on 3 of the ATPs in eukaryotic proteasomes. And they were able to show that the binding of the ATPases involves the interaction of this protein with openings on the top of the proteasome alpha ring. In fact, this was documented by mutagenesis destructive enzymes, or most beautifully, by taking C-terminal peptides and adding them to the 20S proteasome, as we and also Timo Ishino's lab were able to do. This step, we now know, allows the C-terminal peptides to bind to these pockets found between the alpha rings. This is the X-ray diffraction image of 10 years earlier that we really didn't understand. And it became clear from our work and Bill's work that these pockets have a critical icing residue that the ATPase inhibits protein interacts with before gate open. A talented IOEM expert, Nissan Cheng, collaborated with David Smith to obtain the following images of the archaeal protein. In green is the X-ray diffraction from the work 10 years earlier. The cryo-electron microscopic density coming from 20,000 different images is shown here in yellow. The red are where the peptides bind if they contain a Gibbs protein. The Gibbs protein is destroyed or vacuumed. The peptides do not bind in this specific location in the alpha ring openings. Unfolding and translocation are still not understood at this kind of near-atomic resolution. Now, the 26S proteasome structure has been resolved much more beautifully in the last couple of years with the work of Baumeister's group and Martin's group. And we really are trying to understand how these different steps are coordinated. The substrates we now know bind to RPN10 and 13, as was shown by JKH and Finley's groups, which are found at the top of the proteasome. Then there's the deubiquitination by 3 different deubiquitinating enzymes that take apart the ubiquitin and recycle it. Otherwise, it can't enter through the HCPases. And RPN11, for example, is located right above the HCPases. To remove the ubiquitin chain, allow it to enter and be degraded. One important insight we think came from the work of Andreas Tepp that shows that the proteasome itself lacks full activity until it binds to ubiquitin conjugates. In other words, binding an appropriate site that activates the proteasome, it stimulates multiple activities. We would like to understand all of that as well. And just to show you a bit of data, if you add ubiquitin conjugates to the proteasome, you can activate manifold the ability to hydrolyze monopeptide. Also, the critical step of hydrolyzing ATP is activated. So the proteasome is retained in a relatively quiescent form until a conjugate is modified. And the conjugate has to have a ubiquitin chain in a loosely folded domain, as was shown by the work of physicians. For example, if you have a ubiquitinated enzyme like hydrofolate reductase, you activate ATPase. But if you add the strong inhibitor, methotrexate, the anti-cancer drug, that keeps the protein tightly folded, ATPase is kept at a basal level. The protein is not bounded irreversibly and not degraded. So the proteasome is smarter than we thought. It's making decisions on requiring a ubiquitin chain and a loose end of the protein. To put our present mechanistic insights together, the ubiquitin chain first binds to the receptors of the end-predator, and the deubiquitination process begins. This itself triggers activation of the ATPases and gate opening. If there's a protein loosely folded complex that the ATPases can attach onto, this allows the translocation of the substrate through the ATPases into the 20S proteasome and irreversible degradation. The first steps are reversible. Then there's a decision step, which commits to degradation. So many ubiquitinated proteins are probably binding, but never go on to irreversible degradation. Now, as Olivier mentioned, we were able to introduce about 20 years ago. And I think it's good to think about how drugs may be developed. The challenge is most of what I told you just now was completely unknown. The structure and the role of the 19S was vaguely understood. What we did know is the core 20S proteasome had 3 types of active that were trees after hydrophobic residues, basic residues, or acidic residues had different sites, and there were 3 such active sites in each beta ring, as we now know. What we did in setting out to try developing drugs against the proteasome was to try getting small molecules that would form the proteasome, that would mimic these kinds of substrates. And we knew that it was possible to inhibit proteases, such as serine proteases, with aldehydes, which interact with the nucleophilic hydrophilic water residues, the hydroxyl group. We thought the protease was an unusual serine protease, and the sequencing showed that it was a new kind of enzyme, a threonine protease, where the hydrophilic attack is by the hydroxyl group on the terminal threonine, which have allowed the development of very specific inhibitors. The first compounds we introduced were simple hydrophobic peptides, aldehydes, with a phenoxy group or another hydrophobic group to help the peptides get across membrane. This molecule, which has now been used in 11,000 scientific papers, probably by many of you in the audience, is simply 3 leucines in a row, and thus it resembles a high-affinity substrate with a chymotrypsin on site, and then forms a transition state complex, shown here. Then in a small company, we found it called Myogenics, that's therefore the MG. This molecule was converted by a team named Julian Adams first into a boronate, which was known to be a increased efficacy 50-fold, and within several months of medicinal chemistry, Julian and his team were able to generate this molecule, PS341 or bortezomib, which is now been a drug taken by over 700,000 cancer patients around the world. This molecule does just what you'd expect the proteasome inhibitor to do. It inhibits certain gene transcription factors. Orbital mechanics. And this is a specific topic is circular orbits. We're going to start with the basics, and over the next 2 weeks, we learn all of the astrodynamics that you need to be an electrical engineer that does something in space. You can spend an entire career studying this stuff. If you were an aerospace engineer, how many courses in orbital mechanics do they offer at the graduate level in aerospace now? 2 or 3? 2? Okay, so the 2-semester sequence. 2 weeks, and we pass the savings on to you. But you'll know enough to talk with an aerospace person. You'll know all the terminology. But first, let's put a couple of historical dates. You'll notice on some of my sample tests I even ask about some of the key historical dates in satellite engineering. The first one I like to put up is 1945. It was long before we put a spacecraft or anything into outer space. But this was an important article by the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. This is actually a technical article. He wrote an article called Extraterrestrial Relays in Wireless World magazine, a periodical. And his idea was radical at the time. He says, if we could put a radio in space, you could send a signal up to the radio, and it would bounce back to another part of the Earth. And that part could be beyond the horizon, and you would still get the signal. That was actually a pretty radical idea in terms of radio communications back then. The only way to get signals beyond the horizon from a communications standpoint at this time, you could use the telegraph, or you could bounce a signal off the ionosphere. Anything like 1 megahertz or less bounces off the ionosphere because the charged particles are dense enough for those low frequencies to act like a perfect electric conductor. And they bounce the signal to another part of the Earth. You don't get that much bandwidth. And of course, there's only a certain amount of spectrum available. If the entire Earth has to reuse that same spectrum for its bounces, then it becomes a very cluttered radio channel indeed. And of course, the telegraph isn't a very convenient way to send information either. In fact, we're still, believe it or not, I don't know if you believe me, but we're still basically doing the back in 1945. It wasn't until the 50s that we had the transistor, and I could actually do analog voice from one continent to the next, like from New York to London or something like that. The first telegraph, the kind of telegraph, was deployed in the 1860s. Because that's when they laid the cable. And it took until the 50s, because there was really no way to regenerate the analog signal reliably under the sea. You can even do it with tubes, right? You can't exactly change the tubes out if they burn out at the bottom of the ocean. And so, those options were very limited back then. And so this was a radical technology for sending signals beyond the horizon. And we use satellites for a lot of different things nowadays as well. We use it for surveying, we use it for geolocation, navigation systems. But this was the captivating application that began the race for space. And this was a big problem back then. The U.S. was even funding a lot of research around this time to use things like moon-bound communications. So we wanted to spy on the Russians, right? So how do we do that without a satellite? We use the natural Earth satellite to do it. If the moon is in the right spot, the signal goes up, bounces up, it goes back down. But there's a lot of problems with detecting signals that way. It was interesting. Now, and what happened in 1957? Anyone? Almost 60 years ago. First satellite was all. And that forced America to get its act together, and the next year we launched Explorer 1, and the space race was on. That's the first U.S. satellite. And then later that year there was another satellite called SCORE. The first one was Explorer 1. SCORE was the first one to actually transmit a voice broadcast. It transmitted President Eisenhower's State of the Union address at that time. And these were all low Earth orbit satellites, which we'll see what that means in a second. And then in 1962, Bell Labs launched the first commercial communications satellite. Telestar 1 and 2, it's actually 2 satellites. And this became sort of the template for the next several decades of a classic architecture, the classic analog pipe architecture in satellite communications. It had an uplink of 6.389 gigahertz and a downlink of 4.169 gigahertz. And some of the top batteries, and it had a single transponder on it. It didn't have the multiple ones that would come later. This was really the first commercial launch of space. And then in 1980, you had some of the first GPS satellites go up. Satellite system that they had been working on in the late 70s. And this is one of the big innovations in navigation And in fact, we've become so pervasive that we use it to this day still and take it for granted. It's on every phone you've got. It's in bank ATMs. It's in all sorts of crazy things that want to do time and space positioning very precisely. And usually, after we've covered everything in this class, we start off with astrodynamics. You've got to understand where your radios are going to be in order to communicate with them, and what their limitations are. Then we move into antennas and propagation, and figure out how to send signals to and from a device. And we get into telecommunications, and then at the end of the course, I usually spend time working through how GPS works. The last week is geolocation using GPS, because it's such an elegant synthesis of all the pieces that we learned up until that point. So GPS launches at 1980, and then in 2000 you had a lot of low Earth orbit, LEO, low Earth orbit satellite systems launched, like Iridium, Globalstar, Orbicom was another one. These are constellations of 60, 70, 80 low Earth orbit satellites that are providing global coverage to anyone with a personal handheld handset. And I can talk for some more dates on here. I'll cut it off here, but some of the recent things that have been going on in space, we've got the privatization of space. Private companies actually handling launches instead of governments. That's really a big deal. The cost of launches coming down. Some other interesting historical things are happening. Actually, one of the things I've gotten a lot of phone calls about recently, recruiters from Google and some other companies that want to put CubeSats into space. The CubeSat is a small satellite that has these standard dimensions that go up in payloads. It's become a very popular platform for launching little satellite projects. Somebody wants to launch CubeSats into outer space and take a picture, just surveying, take a picture of the Earth, every square inch of it, every day. So you have this massive database of what the Earth looks like every day. Kind of creepy, but interesting. Cool communications project, cool satellite project. I'm even wondering, I'm getting so many recruiting calls, I'm wondering if maybe that should be our project, to design that system for them for free.